I never thought it would come to this. I always considered my marriage with Emily to be solid, if not perfect. We had been together for almost a decade, and on the surface, everything seemed fine. We had our inside jokes, our shared dreams, and even a dog named Max who was basically our child. But over the last 6 months, I started to notice small changes in Emily, things I brushed off as minor bumps in the road of life. At first, it was the late nights. She claimed it was work-related. Being a marketing executive often meant late hours and occasional weekend commitments. I wanted to be supportive, so I told her to focus on her career. After all, this was the same woman who had worked her ass off to get where she was. But then there were the sudden texts that she'd dismiss as nothing important, and the way she would often hide her phone when I was around. I chalked it up to her having a busy life and needing her space. But as the months passed, the unease grew. Emily started dressing differently, more provocatively, I might add. Clothes that I had never seen before. She would come home smelling of perfume that wasn't hers, and the late nights became more frequent. My gut told me something was off, but I couldn't put my finger on it. The breaking point came on a Friday evening. I had planned a nice dinner for us, something to remind us of better times. I got home early, excited to surprise her. As I walked into the living room, I noticed her phone buzzing on the coffee table. I picked it up, thinking she might want to know her friend was texting her. The name on the screen made my blood run cold. Jake. I didn't know a Jake. My stomach twisted with the thought of it. I opened the text and my heart sank. There it was, a flirty back and forth that confirmed my worst fears. I read through the messages, feeling like I was in a nightmare. "Can't wait to see you tonight," one read. "You make me feel alive," said another. My hands shook. I didn't want to believe it, but the evidence was right in front of me. When Emily walked in a few minutes later, I was ready. I confronted her, voice shaking but determined. "Who is Jake?" I demanded. She froze and her eyes widened. For a moment, silence stretched between us like an abyss. I could see the gears turning in her mind, calculating how to spin this into something manageable. "It's not what it looks like," she exclaimed, her voice rising. "He's just a colleague. We've been working on a project together, and sometimes we text about work stuff. You know how it is in marketing." My heart raced. I couldn't believe how easily she tried to lie. I launched into everything I had found: the late nights, the new clothes, the perfume. I could see the panic in her eyes, but she quickly masked it with indignation. "You're overreacting. You're always so jealous and insecure." She shot back. That hit hard. I wasn't jealous, I was concerned. I tried to keep my voice calm, but it escalated. "This isn't just about my insecurities, Emily. You've been unfaithful." She denied it furiously, claiming I was imagining things. But the damage was done, and I could feel the betrayal wrapping around my heart like a vice. The woman I thought I knew, the woman I had built my life with, was unraveling in front of me. Walking away from that confrontation felt like losing a piece of my soul. I thought about the years we had shared, the plans we had made, and how easily they could come crashing down. The emotional impact hit me hard. I felt a mixture of anger, sadness, and disbelief swirling inside me, battling for dominance. I had trusted her completely, and here I was, standing in the ruins of what I thought was love. But it wasn't over yet. I needed to collect myself and figure out what I was going to do. I could feel a storm brewing inside as I contemplated the next steps. The betrayal cut deep, and I knew that if I was going to move forward, I needed to have a plan. As I sat there in the aftermath of that confrontation, I realized that I had to make a decision about my future. I had been living in her shadow, and it was time to reclaim my life. Little did she know, I was about to give myself a second chance, one that didn't involve her. The days following our confrontation were excruciating. I was in a fog, going through the motions of my daily life while the world around me felt like it was crumbling. Every time I walked into our shared home, I was hit with memories of the life we built together. It felt like stepping onto a battlefield, knowing that I had to confront my greatest enemy, my own heart. Emily, for her part, tried to act as though nothing had happened. She would look at me with those pleading eyes, attempting to weave her lies into a tapestry of remorse and longing. "I know I hurt you, but I promise I'll fix this. I want us to be okay," she would say, trying to sound sincere. But I could see her for what she was, someone desperate to keep her life intact while the foundation of our relationship had been shattered. I couldn't afford to let her manipulate me into thinking that I could forgive her and we could just move on. That wasn't how betrayal worked. I started to think about my options. Did I want to fight for a marriage that was built on lies? Was it worth salvaging? The more I pondered, the clearer things became. She didn't deserve a second chance, not after what she had done. But I needed time to gather my thoughts. I reached out to my closest friend, Mark, who had always been my sounding board. We met at our favorite bar, a small, dimly lit place that served the best burgers and craft beers. As I sat across from him, I could feel the weight of my turmoil crashing down. "Dude, I'm so lost," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. Mark listened intently as I recounted the events of the past week, the discovery, the confrontation, and Emily's empty apologies. His expression was a mix of concern and disbelief. "Man, you deserve better than that. She's not even trying to own up to her actions. It's all about her feelings," he said, shaking his head. "You've got to think about what you want." His words echoed in my mind. For the first time, I began to think about myself and what I needed. The decision to stay or go wouldn't come easy, but I realized I had to take control of my own narrative. I had spent too long being reactive, too long putting Emily's needs ahead of my own. It was time to change the script. That night, after Mark and I finished a few rounds of drinks, I went home with a renewed sense of purpose. I could hear Emily in the kitchen busying herself with dinner. The smell of sautéed vegetables filled the air, but I felt sick to my stomach. My heart raced as I entered the kitchen, and I could feel the tension between us thick like fog. "Hey," she said, trying to sound casual. "How was your day?" "Not great," I replied curtly. I looked at her, searching for any semblance of the woman I once loved. "We need to talk." She turned to face me, her expression shifting from casual to alarmed. "About what?" "About us, about everything," I said firmly. "You're going to have to face the fact that you cheated on me, and there are consequences for that." Emily's facade began to crack. I could see her panic rising as I pushed forward. "I can't keep pretending everything's fine. I need you to be honest with me, and I need time to figure out what I want." She opened her mouth to protest, but I was just, "No more excuses," I interrupted, my voice firmer than I intended. "You can't just brush this under the rug. It's not going to disappear because you want it to." Her eyes filled with anger, then remorse. "So what, you're going to just give up on us?" She shot back defensively. "I want to fix this. I'm trying." "Fix what?" I demanded, my heart pounding. "You broke it. You broke my trust. I can't just forget that. You need to understand the gravity of your actions." The confrontation spiraled into an emotional whirlpool. I could see the regret in her eyes mixed with defensiveness, and it made my heart ache. In that moment, I realized that I had been holding onto the idea of our marriage for too long, hoping it would magically patch itself back together. But I had to face the facts. Emily had shattered my trust, and trust, once broken, is a hard thing to rebuild. After a long silence, she finally spoke. "I never meant to hurt you. You know that, right? I just made a mistake." "A mistake you made repeatedly," I replied coldly. "This isn't just a slip-up. You crossed a line, and now I have to decide if I even want to try to fix this or if I'm better off walking away." The weight of the conversation hung heavily in the air. I knew I had to take my time to figure out what I truly wanted. I didn't owe her anything, certainly not a second chance. I could feel the resolve growing within me, and it scared me just as much as it empowered me. I had to reclaim my life and let go of the toxic hold she had on my heart. I stepped back, allowing the reality of my situation to sink in. It was time to give myself a chance at happiness, even if it meant saying goodbye to Emily. It was scary, but deep down, I knew it was the right thing to do. I could feel the door closing on one chapter of my life while another awaited beyond it, one where I would finally choose myself. The following days were a whirlwind of emotions. I found myself oscillating between anger, sadness, and an unexpected sense of liberation. I had given Emily the chance to come clean, but it was clear that she was not willing to take responsibility for her actions. Each interaction felt like a tedious dance where I was forced to navigate her lies and half-hearted explanations. She would often approach me with tears in her eyes, begging for forgiveness, but each time I looked into her eyes, I felt nothing but a hollow ache. I turned to other aspects of my life to distract myself from the pain. Work became my refuge. I buried myself in projects, immersing myself in tasks that kept my mind off the chaos at home. My colleagues noticed my distracted demeanor, but I brushed off their inquiries with vague responses. Just a lot on my plate, I would say, forcing a smile that didn't reach my eyes. At home, things remained tense. Emily tried to act as though everything was normal, but I could see the cracks in her facade. The dinners became quiet, awkward affairs, filled with stilted conversations about trivial matters. I felt like a ghost in my own home, haunted by the memories of what we once had. I started sleeping on the couch, needing the distance from her and the illusion of normalcy. One evening, I sat on the couch scrolling through my phone when I came across a post on social media from one of my old college friends. It was a picture of a cabin in the woods, and it instantly ignited a spark of nostalgia. I'd always found solace in nature, and the thought of being away from the chaos of my life was suddenly appealing. I decided then and there that I needed a break, a chance to escape, think, and truly reflect on my life. I booked a weekend getaway at that cabin, hoping it would provide the clarity I desperately needed. I didn't tell Emily about it. I didn't owe her any explanations. I packed a small bag and left early the next Friday morning, the weight of my decision lifting with every mile I drove away from our home. Arriving at the cabin felt like a breath of fresh air. The crisp mountain air filled my lungs, and the serene silence enveloped me like a warm hug. I spent the first day hiking and reconnecting with nature, allowing the beauty around me to soothe my troubled mind. I felt like I was shedding layers of hurt and betrayal with each step I took into the wilderness. That evening, sitting by the fireplace with a glass of whiskey in hand, I took a moment to reflect. The crackling fire cast a soft glow around the room, illuminating the rustic walls of the cabin. I thought about Emily, her deceit, her excuses, and how she had manipulated my emotions. In that moment, I realized that I had been so focused on her needs for years that I lost sight of my own desires and aspirations. I began writing in a journal, a habit I had abandoned long ago. I poured my heart out, detailing my feelings of betrayal and confusion, but also my dreams for the future, dreams that didn't include Emily. I wrote about how I wanted to regain my sense of self, how I craved freedom and authenticity. It felt cathartic, like I was releasing all the pent-up anger and sadness that had been consuming me. The next morning, I woke up early to the sound of birds chirping outside. I brewed a cup of coffee and stepped out onto the porch, taking in the breathtaking view of the mountains. It struck me then that I was finally starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel. The fog of betrayal was lifting, and I felt a sense of resolve growing within me. I was done being a victim to someone else's choices. As the sun began to rise, casting a golden hue over the landscape, I made a mental list of what I needed to do when I returned home. I had to confront Emily again, but this time it would be different. I wouldn't be the one seeking answers or validation. I would be the one asserting my worth. I needed to tell her that I could no longer live in a marriage built on lies and deceit. The weekend passed in a blur of self-discovery and rejuvenation. When it was finally time to return, I felt lighter, almost as if a heavy burden had been lifted from my shoulders. I drove home with a renewed sense of purpose, ready to reclaim my life and stand up for myself. Upon arriving, I found the house eerily quiet. Emily was likely at work, and I took the opportunity to gather my thoughts before she returned. I paced the living room, adrenaline coursing through my veins. As I rehearsed the words I would say, I couldn't let her charm me back into submission. I had to be steadfast in my resolve. When Emily finally walked through the door, I braced myself for the confrontation. She looked up, surprise flickering across her face when she saw me standing there, waiting. "You're home early," she said, her tone casual, but I could see the tension beneath the surface. "Yeah, I need to talk to you," I replied, my voice steady. Her smile faltered, and I took a deep breath, ready to lay everything on the line. "I've spent the weekend thinking about us, about our marriage, and I've come to a decision. It was time to take control of my narrative and let the healing begin. I would no longer allow her infidelity to define me. I was ready to say goodbye to the illusion of our marriage and embrace a new beginning for myself. The room felt charged with tension as I stood there, my heart racing. Emily's eyes darted around, searching my face for clues, but I remained resolute. I've had enough of the lies, Emily. I can't pretend that everything is okay anymore. You cheated on me and I deserve better than this. Her expression shifted from confusion to disbelief, and for a fleeting moment I could see the mask slipping. "What are you saying?" she asked, her voice trembling. "You can't be serious." "I'm very serious," I replied, my tone unwavering. "I've thought long and hard about what this means for us, and I've come to the conclusion that I can't stay in this marriage. Trust is everything in a relationship, and you shattered mine. I'm done. I want a divorce." The words hung in the air, heavy and final. I watched as a whirlwind of emotions crossed her face: shock, anger, sorrow. She opened her mouth to say something, but no words came out. It was as if the weight of my declaration had rendered her speechless. "Divorce," she echoed, finally finding her voice. "You can't just throw away everything we've built together. We can fix this. I know I messed up, but I want to make things right." I felt a pang of sadness at her desperation. The woman standing before me was not the same Emily I had once loved. She was a stranger, someone who had betrayed my trust and broken the vows we had made to each other. "You had your chance to fix this, Emily. You chose to betray me, and now I'm choosing to walk away." Her face turned red with anger, and she stepped closer, trying to close the distance between us. "So what? You're going to throw me out of our home just like that? You think this is easy for me? You think I wanted any of this?" Her voice raised, filled with hurt and indignation. "No, I don't think it was easy for you," I replied, keeping my voice calm. "But you made your choices, and now I have to make mine. I need to prioritize my own happiness for once. I can't keep living like this." For a moment, silence enveloped us. Emily's bravado began to falter, and I could see the tears welling in her eyes. "Please," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I love you. Can't we at least try? I'm willing to go to counseling, to do whatever it takes." The desperation in her plea tugged at my heartstrings, but I knew I had to. "Stay strong. Emily, love isn't enough when trust has been broken. You say you love me, but love shouldn't come with conditions or betrayals. I can't keep giving you chances to hurt me again." Her shoulders slumped and she took a step back, finally realizing that I was serious. "I can't believe this is happening," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I never wanted to lose you." "Then you shouldn't have cheated," I replied, my heart heavy. "I'm sorry it has to end this way, but I need to move on. I deserve to be happy, and I can't do that while being with someone who has hurt me like this." The finality of my words hung in the air. I could see the tears streaming down her cheeks, but I felt a strange sense of relief mixed with sorrow. I had made my choice, and it was time to stick to it. "I'll move out," she said, her voice trembling. "I'll find somewhere else to go." It was as if the fight had left her, and she finally understood the gravity of the situation. I nodded, trying to maintain my composure. "I think that's for the best. We both need space to figure things out." As she walked away, I felt a mix of relief and heartbreak. I had just made the hardest decision of my life, but I knew it was the right one. I had to prioritize my own well-being, even if it meant saying goodbye to the life I had envisioned with Emily. The following days were filled with an array of emotions. There was sadness and grief over the loss of our marriage, but there was also an exhilarating sense of freedom. I began to envision a life without her, one filled with potential and possibility. It was a chance to rediscover myself and reclaim my happiness. Emily moved out within a week, taking only her belongings and leaving behind the memories of our life together. The house felt different, emptier, but there was a strange lightness in the air. I found solace in the fact that I was finally free from the weight of her betrayal. As I settled into this new chapter, I took the time to reflect on what I wanted from life. I started to explore hobbies I had neglected, like painting and hiking, and I connected with friends I had lost touch with during my marriage. I was beginning to feel like myself again. One night I decided to call Mark and see if he wanted to grab dinner. It felt good to reconnect with someone who had always supported me. Over burgers and beers, I shared the details of my newfound freedom. "I can't believe you actually went through with it," he said, raising his glass in a toast. "You deserve this. You did what was right for you." "Thanks, man," I replied, feeling grateful for his support. "It's been tough, but I'm starting to feel hopeful again. I'm ready for whatever comes next." As we shared stories and laughter, I realized that I was no longer the person who had been defined by Emily's choices. I was reclaiming my identity, and in that moment, I felt a glimmer of hope for the future. It was time to embrace new beginnings, and I was ready to welcome them with open arms. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of a journey towards self-discovery and healing. I had learned a valuable lesson. Sometimes the hardest decisions lead to the most profound growth. I was ready to face whatever life had in store for me, one step at a time. In the weeks that followed Emily's departure, I began to settle into my new routine. The house was quieter, and while there were moments of loneliness, I found comfort in the solitude. I immersed myself in activities that sparked joy, long hikes in the nearby mountains, painting landscapes that caught my eye, and even learning how to cook dishes that I had always wanted to try. I also reconnected with friends, those I had neglected during my marriage. We would gather for game nights, barbecues, and late-night talks, and it felt exhilarating to share laughter and camaraderie. I felt as though I was rediscovering pieces of myself that had long lain dormant. It was liberating to be in control of my own happiness, and I relished every moment of it. One evening, while scrolling through social media, I saw an announcement for a local art exhibition featuring the works of up-and-coming artists. It piqued my interest, so I decided to check it out. The event was buzzing with energy, and as I walked through the gallery, I felt a spark of excitement at the creativity around me. I marveled at the different styles and expressions, and for the first time in a long while I felt inspired. As I wandered through the gallery, I noticed a striking painting that caught my eye. It depicted a sunset over the ocean, vibrant and full of life. I stood there captivated when a voice interrupted my thoughts. "Beautiful, isn't it?" a woman asked. I turned to see a tall brunette with bright green eyes, her smile warm and inviting. "It really is," I replied, feeling a flutter of attraction. "There's something about the colors that just draws you in." "I know what you mean," she said, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "I'm Sarah, by the way. I'm one of the artists here." "Nice to meet you, Sarah. I'm Jake," I said, extending my hand. We shook hands and fell into an easy conversation, discussing our mutual love for art and what inspired us to create. I found her passion infectious, and as we talked, I felt a connection that I hadn't felt in ages. Throughout the evening, we laughed and shared stories about our lives, and I found myself opening up in a way I hadn't expected. I told her about my recent divorce and how it had propelled me to rediscover my passions. She listened intently, her eyes reflecting empathy and understanding. "I'm really sorry to hear that," she said softly. "But it sounds like you're on a path to a new beginning. That's amazing." When the night came to a close, we exchanged numbers, and I walked away feeling lighter than I had in a long time. There was something refreshing about connecting with someone new, someone who didn't carry the baggage of my past. I couldn't help but feel hopeful about the possibilities ahead. Over the next few weeks, Sarah and I began to spend more time together. We would go for hikes, visit art galleries, and share meals at local restaurants. She had a zest for life that was contagious. I found myself laughing more than I had in years, and I started to realize how important it was to embrace the present moment instead of dwelling on the past. But as I grew closer to Sarah, I also had to confront some of my lingering feelings about Emily. There were moments when I would catch myself comparing them, or wondering if I was rushing into something new too quickly. However, I reminded myself that I was allowed to seek happiness again. I had spent too long in a toxic situation, and now it was time to embrace the opportunities life had to offer. One afternoon, while sitting on a park bench overlooking a serene lake, Sarah turned to me and asked, "What are you looking for in a relationship right now?" It was a loaded question, and I paused to reflect. "Honestly, I'm looking for someone genuine, someone who values honesty and communication," I replied. "After everything I went through with my ex, I just want to ensure that I'm with someone who respects me and my boundaries." She nodded, her expression thoughtful. "That makes sense. It's important to find someone who aligns with your values. I'm in a similar place. I want to build something meaningful but without the drama. As we continued talking, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. It was refreshing to have an open dialogue about our intentions and desires. I realized I was no longer the wounded man who had been cheated on. I was someone ready to embrace love again, but on my own terms. The weeks turned into months, and my connection with Sarah deepened. We shared laughter, stories, and dreams, and I found myself feeling a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in years. I was no longer haunted by the past. Instead, I was building a future filled with possibilities. But even as I thrived in this new relationship, I knew I had to fully close the chapter on my marriage to Emily. It was time to formally finalize the divorce, and I couldn't ignore that nagging sense of unfinished business. I scheduled a meeting with my lawyer to discuss the next steps and prepare for what was to come. The day of the meeting arrived, and I walked into the office with a mixture of trepidation and determination. I was ready to take control of my life, to ensure that my future was mine and mine alone. My lawyer outlined the process, and I felt a sense of clarity as we discussed the division of assets and the emotional toll of the separation. When it came time to sign the papers, I felt a wave of emotions wash over me: relief, sadness, and a newfound sense of empowerment. I was officially closing the door on the chapter that had caused me so much pain. As I signed my name, I felt as if I was shedding the weight of my past, and it invigorated me. The process wasn't easy, but with each step, I felt more liberated. I knew that while there would be challenges ahead, I was ready to embrace them. I was finally on the path toward healing, growth, and a future that I could shape for myself. As I walked out of the lawyer's office, I pulled out my phone and texted Sarah, inviting her to meet me for dinner. I wanted to share the news with her, not just as an update, but as a celebration of my newfound freedom and the possibility of what lay ahead. Life was starting to blossom again, and I was ready to embrace it fully, unencumbered by the shadows of my past. I was ready to step into my future, and this time, it felt like I was finally in control. Dinner with Sarah that evening felt lighter than air. I arrived at the restaurant, a cozy little Italian place with warm lighting and the enticing aroma of fresh pasta wafting through the air. When Sarah walked in, her smile lit up the room and I couldn't help but return it. It was a small moment, but it felt monumental to me. As we settled into our booth, I took a moment to soak in the ambience: soft music playing in the background, the gentle clinking of glasses, and the laughter of other patrons. It was a stark contrast to the chaos that had dominated my life just months prior. I felt a sense of gratitude wash over me. "I'm so glad we could do this," Sarah said, stirring her pasta with a fork. "There's something about sharing a meal that makes everything feel right in the world." "I completely agree," I replied, feeling the warmth of her presence. "There's just something about good food and good company that can lift your spirits." As the meal progressed, I shared with her the news of my finalized divorce. I recounted my meeting with the lawyer and how liberating it felt to close that chapter of my life. It was like finally shedding a heavy coat that I didn't realize I had been wearing for so long. I explained, my voice filled with a mix of pride and relief. "Wow, that's a huge step," she said, her eyes reflecting genuine admiration. "I'm proud of you for taking that leap. It's not easy to move on from something like that." "It feels like I'm finally in control of my own narrative," I admitted. "For the first time in a long time, I'm excited about the future." Sarah reached across the table and squeezed my hand, her touch igniting a spark of something new between us. "You deserve all the happiness in the world, Jake. I can see how much you've grown since we met. You're not the same person you were a few months ago." Her words resonated deeply with me. I had been through a storm, but I was emerging stronger and more resilient. "I appreciate that, Sarah. You've played a big role in helping me see that I can embrace new beginnings." After dinner, as we walked outside into the cool evening air, I felt a sense of warmth radiating from our connection. The world around me felt vibrant, alive with possibilities. I turned to Sarah, looking into her bright green eyes. "I'm really glad we met," I said sincerely. You've brought so much joy into my life." She smiled back, and in that moment I knew I wanted to explore this connection further. "I feel the same way, Jake. There's something special about what we have, and I'd like to see where it goes." As we lingered outside the restaurant, I leaned in and kissed her softly. It was a gentle kiss, but it felt like a promise of new beginnings. I felt a rush of hope and excitement, realizing that I was ready to embrace love again, this time with a foundation built on honesty and mutual respect. The following weeks were filled with laughter, adventure, and deeper connections. Sarah and I explored the city together, trying new restaurants, going to art shows, and even taking spontaneous road trips. Each moment spent with her felt like a breath of fresh air, liberating me from the shadows of my past. As the seasons changed, so did I. I started to embrace not only a new relationship but also a new outlook on life. I began focusing on my own passions, painting more, joining a local hiking group, and even signing up for a cooking class. I was reclaiming my identity, not just as a man who had been cheated on, but as a person capable of thriving independently. One day, while on a hike with Sarah, I found myself standing at the edge of a breathtaking view. The mountains stretched out before us, painted in hues of orange and pink as the sun set. It was a moment of clarity. I felt a deep sense of gratitude for everything I had been through. The pain had shaped me, but it didn't define me. "I'm so glad we're here together," Sarah said, sitting beside me on a rock. "This is beautiful." "It really is," I replied, taking in the scenery and the serenity of the moment. "I feel like I've finally found my footing again, and it's all thanks to you." She smiled, leaning her head on my shoulder, and I wrapped my arm around her. In that moment, I realized that I was no longer the man defined by betrayal. I was a man who had faced adversity and emerged stronger, ready to embrace all that life had to offer. As I watched the sun dip below the horizon, I felt a sense of peace settle in my heart. It was the end of one chapter, but it was also the beginning of something beautiful. I was ready to walk forward, hand in hand with Sarah, into a future filled with promise, joy, and an unwavering belief in new beginnings. There would be challenges ahead, but I was equipped to handle them. This time I was not just surviving, I was truly living. And I knew, without a doubt, that I was exactly where I needed to be.